Welcome back to the Friday Golf Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Johnson. Today, I am joined by Friday Golf's own Kevin Van Valkenburg and Joseph LaMagna to bat around a bunch of subjects, including Brooks Koepka's the news that he'll be back on tour, as well as do a little bit of kind of some season preview stuff. As a note, we recorded this last Wednesday. Following Chris Gotterup's win at Hawaii, that was something I brought up, was Chris Gotterup. I wish we had aired this earlier so I could say, hey, look at this. But this was recorded last Wednesday. One of my predictions, not to play spoiler, was a guy like Chris Gotterup might break out and become a top 12 player in the world. He is now 17th, but he won at Sony. This was a really fun chat. I'm looking forward to having this crew on probably about once every month, where we'll bat around subjects and topics. If you have anything that you'd like us to discuss in the future, feel free to send that in. All right, let's get to Kevin and Joseph. All right. Today, I'm joined by Friday Golf's very own Kevin Van Valkenburg and Joseph LaMagna, two gentlemen that are dedicated to the pro golf beat. It's been a fast-paced start to the year with news. It felt like golf's version of a Woj bomb came in with Brooks Koepka returning to the PGA Tour after a stint with the LIV Golf League, really since the beginnings of LIV Golf. Brooks is back. He had to pay the troll toll to get back on the PGA Tour. He had a $5 million charitable contribution, which is of course tax deductible. He is not he's not eligible for the player equity program. He's not eligible for FedEx Cup playoff payouts, bonuses from that. He is not eligible for signature event exemptions, but he can earn his way in, like he can earn his way into the FedEx Cup. And he will not be taking away spots in fields. If anything, he is adding to them by bringing people along to make uneven numbers, work out. So this was all kind of headed up by Brian Rolapp, the new CEO of PGA Tour Enterprises, and really is a landmark decision in this kind of war with LIV that has now spanned nearly 5 years of our lives. It is the PGA Tour going on the offensive, bringing Brooks back. Now that's enough of the details. Joseph and Kevin, what do you guys make of Brooks Koepka's return to the PGA Tour?
Go ahead, Kevin.
I think it's good for golf in general. I think it's clear that Brooks was not particularly in love with playing on the LIV Tour. He has been kind of whispering to anybody who would listen in private over the last few years that he wishes that he could go back in time and do this differently. And now he's got a fresh start. His results in majors were not particularly good last year. And I think that golf overall will benefit from a more focused, happier Brooks Koepka. I don't know about the whole spending more time with my family stuff here and there. Like only Brooks could speak to that. But I think, it doesn't necessarily, I think, make for a super competitive element to the PGA Tour because Brooks has never shown that he's like all that interested in PGA Tour golf. But if it does help him get sharp in majors, I think it's a big win for us all because Brooks is true needle mover in majors, and seeing him play well in there would be a true rising tide lifts all boats kind of situation.
Yeah, I think this could age poorly, but from a Brooks Koepka standpoint, as Kevin alluded to, he doesn't really care that much about his PGA Tour performances. So I'm not sure this is going to be some kind of boon to the PGA Tour product. Hopefully we see Brooks in some majors playing well. But to me, the most significant part of this news is that it does signify Brian Rolapp starting to put his thumb on the scale a little bit and feel confident about the position that the tour is in, that more guys aren't going to leave. A little bit of a more frictionless coming and going between the tours, I think would benefit a lot of people. And I think clearly Rolapp feels like they're not really at risk of more PGA Tour defections. Siwoo Kim didn't go. Like, there's rumors that Max Grazerman got a big deal. He didn't go. So I think the PGA Tour has to be feeling pretty good about their position in this window, this one-time window that expires on February 2nd, even if none of the other golfers partake in it. Bryson, Cam Smith, Rahm. I think it still signifies that they're now dealing in a position of strength.
Yeah, I think I echo that. I think one of the big things from the perspective of the tour as a whole, this was really the first move where you could feel like this is no longer the nonprofit member-run organization. This is a move that signifies the understanding of we are an organization that is actively attempting to make money, and we are actively trying to add value to our equity holders, which are the players. You see it from the reaction also of the players, where we haven't heard anything yet. Sure, we will hear something. If we hear, James Hahn chirping about this, yeah, sure. Like, that might be just a one-off. But in all, it seems like the players are behind this, and it might be a sign of them understanding, hey, Brooks adds value to this tour, and I own the tour. So it is a good thing for me if Brooks is playing high-level golf on this tour. The question of, does Brooks play high-level golf on this tour is a big one. But in Brooks Koepka coming back, whether he plays well or plays poorly, you are getting one of the 10 most marketable golfers in the sport, without a doubt. I think he probably is like right around top 5, is where you'd have him. He is one of the most marketable players in the sport, and the tour is better off having him than not having him. And I think it'll be interesting to see if there's some rejuvenation. Nobody does their best work when they're happy. And he clearly, as Kevin alluded to, was not really happy where he was. So I'm curious to see the player reaction as we kind of get away from the blast radius, as the golf schedule is opening up. More and more players are available to reporters. What is, the overarching philosophy of the players? But I think where they won here was like, the only people that are eligible to come back by their criteria is Bryson, Rahm, and Cam Smith, and that is like kind of like saying we really only wanted Bryson, Rahm, and Brooks. It was what I gauged it from, and Cam Smith just happened to fall under this classification as well.
Yeah, even if Cam Smith wanted to come back, I'm not sure that his game at the current state would be competitive enough for the PGA Tour, and so it was no surprise to see Cam just basically like, "Yeah, mate, I'm good. Like, I'm happy to where I am." So I don't know. I mean, like, the Bryson is really like a bigger domino, I think, even than Rahm in some ways. Like, I just don't see a realistic scenario where Jon Rahm could get out of his contract, nor would it would take such an ego sort of swallowing moment for John to admit, like, hey, I thought that this was the right play, and clearly it wasn't. But Bryson has a kind of an interesting out, right? Like, you see him say it, even if it's a negotiating position, like, hey, I'm only committed to this through another year. Like, Bryson could very easily say, like, yeah, I'm happy to leave this once it's done. They just couldn't meet my price, and go back to, playing a more competitive tour. It's impossible to predict what Bryson will want to do, but I think it sort of segues a little bit, Andy, into the next moment of like, what is the future of LIV? Like, what if these guys go or stay? Like, are we at sort of an inflection point where, it could kind of be the beginning of the end, or is it just kind of doesn't matter?
I think the one other question I had about this was like, the player return the return program they have set up. They have this hard deadline. If a year from now, before we get to the future of LIV, if a year from now, Rahm or Bryson wants to come back, are they going to say no? I just don't see that being. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think it was, look, as someone who covered the NFL for a long time and kind of knows a little bit about how Roger Goodell operates, like, you can see some of the influence that in Rolapp's reasoning and thinking. And it's probably why he's a better CEO, certainly more than Jay Monahan. Now, like part of the trade-off, and I wrote a bit about this week in the newsletter, is like, this is what the powers that, Rolapp got in exchange for like a $3 billion investment from, SSG. Like there was no scenario where Jay Monahan was going to be able to sort of ram this kind of legislation through in the same way that Rolapp could. But like, if you want that $3 billion of investment, then like Rolapp's going to come in and he's going to, instead of just like, taking the input of Peter Malnati, he's taking the input of like Arthur Blank. Like, and so I think that certainly weighs a lot more in this equation. Rolapp, you're right. The NFL changes the rules every year, and they change things to benefit what they feel like the product is going to be immediately. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was like, yeah, we said that was the deadline, but you know what? Now we're ripping up a new deadline, and now Bryson is welcome back in 2027. So I think, and that's probably the best move for now. That'll come with a little bit of downside too, in that like the nostalgia element of things is not going to really factor into Rolapp's decision making. That's why we might see Hawaii go away. It's why we're going to see like career money exemptions probably go away. But that's what is best for the business, probably.
Joseph, outside of the names that fit the player, the return program, the people coming back, who would be the other names that you would be keen to get back on the tour that you see value in LIV, that are on LIV that you would see value in a return to the PGA Tour? Because I don't think there are a ton, but outside those two, with the qualifications, the way they set them, a lot of rumors maybe to exclude Phil Mickelson, which it seems like probably was the case. But what are the other names that might fall under like, hey, this would be a nice player that you'd like to see back?
Yeah, I guess there's two parts to that. Some names would be nice to see back because they're good golfers, and then other ones are needle movers. And I don't think there are many needle movers. Probably the only ones would be Dustin Johnson and Phil Mickelson. And I don't know that either of those golfers is either super competitive right now, nor wants to return to the PGA Tour. Outside
DJ
of that,
just re-up. DJ just re-up today for 3 more years. Right. So it
probably
seems unlikely.
His eye on a new boat and took care of
but
that.
I'd love to see, if Dustin Johnson showed a little form, he'd be cool to have back. But I don't think we're ever going to see that again. Patrick Reed, Joaquin Niemann, like Tyrrell Hatton. I think those are golfers who are clearly good enough when they're on to be playing on the PGA Tour and would add value that way. But I don't know that ratings or anything tangible to the business would go up if those golfers rejoined. And then after that, I think you're talking about young names who haven't quite developed yet, who 2-3 years from now could be beneficial to have on the most competitive tour in the world, right? Your David Puig, Jose Le Ballesteros, potentially somebody like a McKibben, and Elvis Smiley, a Caleb Surratt, if those golfers develop a little bit more. But honestly, I don't think there's anybody the PGA Tour really needs.
To frame kind of the conversation of the future of LIV, and it kind of piggybacks off what you just said. In your estimation, what percentage of the LIV Golf Tour is of the caliber of a top 100 player on the PGA Tour?
I'd say to be a signature event level, so top 50, there's probably 6 to 8. And then after that could make top 100, another 5 to 8. I'd have to look at the roster laid out, but the back half of LIV is super weak and uncompetitive and would have no chance of hanging on the PGA Tour. So we're really talking about probably 10 names. Like, we'll see what kind of year Carlos Ortiz has, but is anybody really thinking about Carlos Ortiz?
Almost won the US Open.
Yeah, I mean, he's a pretty good player, but like, sure, he could keep his PGA Tour card, but does that actually really matter? Are you trying to include Carlos Ortiz in the returning member program?
Yeah, that's where I kind of fall. Is like, if I went through the roster, I think I'd get to about 20 names of real bona fide PGA Tour quality players. Maybe, that's like where you could get to like, okay, this guy could play and keep his, any of them could have a bad year and lose their card, but could play, and I could see keeping a card on the PGA Tour. like your Harold Varners of the world. Like, I don't think he's really what he was before he got the bag, but like in a grand scheme of things, we've seen him be a top 50 PGA Tour player before. I think like when you talk about LIV, and this kind of can frame up like where we're going from here. This feels like a big blow to LIV, losing Brooks Koepka, the uncertainty of Bryson right now. And really, when you look at LIV in the, since 2021, 2022, when this league got off the ground, where it's gotten to is that they have a grouping of talented players, a small grouping of talented players in small fields. As we just mentioned, these players make up a small percentage of the field, and they have not resonated with fans. There's been a copious amount of money spent, $5 billion plus spent to create this league. And I think there's more uncertainty. It currently is the way it's run by a sovereign wealth fund that could fund this forever and it'd be a blip on the radar. But I think this puts into a real question of what is the future and where does LIV go from here? Because if their offseason struggles of signing players is anything, they had dalliances and rumors with a number of players, from Akshay Bhatia to Max Grazerman to Siwoo Kim, and none of them went. They ended up getting Elvis Smiley, a DP World Tour player, a promising young player, was kind of, their big addition this year. And, if you don't count Laurie Cantor, what
disrespect to Tommy Dietrich, though.
Oh, that's true.
Illinois crime here.
Block that out. But yeah, Tom Dietrich would be the bona fide. But the question is what does the next 5 to 10 years of LIV look like, assuming it exists in 5 to 10 years?
I don't want to be one of those people who's like, oh yeah, LIV is done, LIV is dead, because I don't think that's necessarily true. But I just wonder, like, what is the point where they're going to like gain momentum to where they're going to become a success? Like Jon Rahm didn't make any difference. Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau hasn't really made a differse. And now
Bryson was the only one that's made a difference.
Even that though, like I will say Bryson probably has made I would say 80% of the people who come to LIV events are like seeing Bryson is like a high priority on their list, right? That's one of the biggest reasons they want to come to that. So, signing Bryson for the next 4 or 5 years would be huge for LIV, right? Like that's the only thing I think at this point that's probably not even like keeping them off life support, but just having any chance of the like, hey, someday 5 years from now, you are like an equal, spot in the world as in terms of golf tours. Like if you lose Bryson, I don't see the path that goes to that, right? If you keep Bryson, well, maybe a lot of things still got to go your way, and he's got to be truly like, emerge as like the best player in the world, winning 2 or 3 more majors. But if you lose him, like if I were Bryson, I would be so thrilled right now. I'd be like, yo, 800 million is the starting offer that you need to offer me. I'm like 50% more than you offer Jon Rahm. And if you don't want to do that, like screw it. I'll go make less money over on LIV, but I'll do it, or excuse me, on the PGA Tour, but I'll do as much of my YouTube stuff as I want, or I'll just try to become the Mr. Beast of golf and YouTube and not play on either tour. Like I don't, at this point he's got a lot of money, so he doesn't really like need more money, but like he's sure in a good position to ask for more of it.
Andy, I don't want to sound too much like nothing matters, but I do think pretty much nothing matters that LIV does, honestly. That there's no catalyst. They could sign Rory or Scotty. That would probably be the only thing that moves any kind of needle, and I don't think either of those players has any interest in playing for LIV. There's no indication that they do. Maybe LIV South Africa is cool this year, and at the end of the year they can say, well, LIV Australia and LIV South Africa work very well. Like that's the only things I can really see working. Nobody cares about the team event championship anymore. or ever to start with. Like, I don't see any way that the league gains any sort of momentum. And I think it's just around until Yasser decides that he's done with it, or somebody offers Yasser some kind of exit ramp so that it's not an embarrassment. And then they sort of frame it as this is the next evolution of LIV. Maybe it's some kind of partnership with the DP World Tour. I don't know what that would look like, but I think acting like them signing somebody else, or even one of their young guys winning a major or something like that's going to have any impact on the popularity of the league at this point is pretty delusional based on what we've witnessed the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's clearly that the market's rejecting, at least the American market has rejected the product. Now, like, before I get, in trouble, like, there, as you said, LIV Australia has been a success. My question, though, is, when you talk about 5 years from now, is, if in a couple years Rahm's contract's done, he leaves. In a couple years, if Bryson doesn't remain, the real appeal of LIV Australia was we're bringing some of the top players in the game to Australia, a place people have forgotten about. There are DP World events, Australian Tour events in Australia. There is pro golf. And at a certain point with LIV, and why they're almost, this is actually kind of a pun intended, held hostage by Bryson. Usually it's the other way around. The one of the reasons that exists is like their premise as this, what they're trying to be, this world tour, has to be having a collection of the best players in the world. And when they don't, if it becomes just, that, like, if we're going to be blunt here, like, Phil Mickelson and Dustin Johnson are not world-class players anymore. World-class names, not players. If it becomes just Rahm and Tyrrell Hatton and, Joaquin Niemann, you've lost a lot of that appeal of, we're bringing, like, that's where Brooks had a lot of value, was this is a 5-time major winner. This is a guy that won a PGA championship 2 years ago and is without question one of the great players of this generation that still exists today. And I think that's where all of a sudden, losing Brooks, and if they lose, the kind of, they would call it in corporate world, brain drain, of, where you start to lose players, like, that appeal to Australia becomes less.
I think LIV is in a toughest spot is if you could go back and reimagine this. If LIV was just a true team golf thing, I think you could get behind it so much better. Like, it would be if you could say, like, hey, these guys are welcome to go play on the PGA Tour whenever they want, but these team events are going to be sort of, we're going to have 4 teams in every event, and the 2 teams are going to play each other in semifinals on the first day or whatever, and then the 2 teams are going to meet in a match play in the finals. And I could see, like, that being so much more interesting and different and appealing as long as you remove the moral element of the funding stuff. Like, I think that would be such a better way to sort of make it, to differentiate it. They're in the pickle in that, like, in order to make it a worldwide tour that's super appealing to people, you had to promise these guys that, like, hey, we're going to get world ranking points, so you won't lose out on this. Jon Rahm, like, you can come here and eventually, like, you'll earn your way into majors through LIV events. And so we have to have a stroke play element to it. But man, if they really wanted to make it like F1 or like cricket or whatever, it should just be a team thing. Like, that's when the appeal of, like, hey, the South Koreans versus the South Africans, like, you could develop real rivalries in that way. The Australians versus, the US, all of that sounds kind of fun. But when you're saying, like, trying to split the baby and be like, oh, well, this is the stroke play element, this is the team element, but really the team play, the team stuff really matters. No one gives a shit about that stuff. And that's why the captaincy stuff and the equity stuff and the branding stuff just never really works, is because you're trying to be 2 different things at the same time.
I think if you replayed, different moments in history, and this is always easy to do when you sit back, but, if obviously Jay Monahan, blood on his hands, he didn't pick up the call. But if you think about LIV in a regard of, it wasn't the right time for a partnership with the PGA Tour, and I don't think now is the right time. Will Zalatoris was on this podcast last week, and he, his comment was like, when you look at it, like, what are we actually buying? All we want is a few players. There's nothing else to buy here. But when you think about if you gave a real innovative leader, and this is not Greg Norman. Greg Norman's a shit stirrer. And for everybody saying Greg Norman was the perfect man for the job, well, look what he's left you now. Look what he's left Yasser now. He's left Yasser. He's spent $5 billion and they have nothing. He's a terrible leader with lack of innovation. Like just went into it to exercise a grudge. And what's left is a really a valueless organization outside of a few names that they have under contract. The thing about, if you thought about this with an innovative leader, with, the current structure of the PGA Tour, if you went in today and said, I want to spend $5 billion to develop this team golf format that I think could be really big, I think it would be, you would end up with a smash hit with the current leadership. And the premise around it wouldn't be, we have the washed up guys from England. No, what if we had the great players from England? What if it was, Tyrrell Hatton, Tommy Fleetwood, and, Justin Rose and somebody else? What if, there were a couple teams from America that were, located across, there was a Jupiter team, a Dallas team, a Scottsdale team. There's the Australians. Like, if you created this format within the ecosystem without dividing the players and then making the teams all suck because of it versus what they could be if there was unity, I think you'd end up with a killer golf format that could potentially, overtake the popularity of the PGA Tour. But it wasn't ever, I think you're right about, like, they had an identity crisis from the start, and there wasn't a strong leader with a vision. There was a leader that was carrying out a grudge, and that's why this thing failed.
I agree with both of you to an extent. Like, if they'd done the team thing from the beginning, it would have been more successful than the current product. Totally agree. I still think deep down, team golf, there's a lot that works about individual 72-hole stroke play golf, and that might be the answer. Maybe we need to spread out the schedule a little bit more, but we might not need more golf and a new innovative format of golf. Like, just going to great venues, having competitive tournaments, building up the Australian Open, maybe building up tournaments like the Irish Open and some other national opens, like, that might be enough. And all this, we're doing it wrong, there needs to be team golf. Like, I'm not sold that any of that actually would have had a chance. And you would have run into some logistical issues. Like, okay, somebody plays really well in a team event, doesn't get any credit for it from an OWGR standpoint, isn't in the Masters. Like, guys would not have been okay with that. So part of me thinks we kind of have enough with, call it 20 events, 22 events, 72-hole stroke play. That takes a lot of time. That's half the year. That's golfers preparing, letting their bodies rest. I'm not sure we need more golf.
It's a fair point. What's your prediction 5 years from now? Does LIV exist? And what does it look like?
I think it gets folded into some form of the DP World Tour. Like, unless Yasser is, like, sort of ousted as the head of the PIF entirely, and then it just kind of goes away almost immediately. I think that the face saving will include, like, hey, this is going to sponsor like 4 events on the DP World Tour, or it's going to sponsor the, end of the year race to Dubai is going to be, like, part of the Public Investment Fund or Aramco or something. I just, I think that the moment when there was maybe a moment when it could have tipped, when the inflection point came, and it just didn't happen. But at this point, I don't see how it ever is bigger than it is right now. And I think that you could say that it's contracting in some ways right now. Like this might be the high point of LIV, or it was 6 months ago.
I don't think team golf will exist in 5 years. So mostly agreeing with Kevin here. Like,
what about TGL?
I was going to say outdoor team golf, but I'm not so sure about that.
I don't know that TGL will exist in 5 years either.
I could see some kind of merge, or like, okay, the Australian event worked and the South African one, that's some franchise that there's got to be like some component of face saving, Yasser not wanting to admit total defeat. But I think the chances that Torquay exists or is rebranded 5 years from now is pretty low. But we'll see. They can run it as long as they want to run it.
Let it be clear, the PIF had a chance to coexist as part of the ecosystem of the PGA Tour. They were just insulted that the PGA Tour was like, all right, we value what you have here at $800 million, and we think that's generous. And they were insulted by that. They were like, there's no way like that we've sunk $5 billion into this. How can you say that that's what our value is? And that was like the biggest sticking point. That, and like, we can't get you an Augusta National membership. Sorry, like that is not going to be part of this negotiation. And so LIV was like, all right, screw it. We think we can go out on our own and do, continue this along. And, it's like President Trump came in, said he thought he was going to fix it. And that obviously didn't happen. So like at that point, was there any way that this was going to actually ever come together and be a part of it? I mean, I think LIV can look back in 5 years and say, we had a chance to be a huge part of professional golf and we passed on it kind of because of ego.
Yeah, I think there's an adage, and I think it's prescient, at least to play devil's advocate over the rest of the golf world, is you never underestimate a very well-funded competitor.
True.
These things, companies and institutions are built over decades of time. And I think assuming they don't lose interest in golf, which I don't think they will. It's a huge part of their, kind of future tourism as a country. I think they will continue to do this. And my question is, at this point, if you're LIV and you're working under some constraint of like, you have this many dollars per year, what is the pivot? To me, what you have right now has to be completely blown up. And that is not admitting defeat. It's not admitting, it is saying we are a startup and, we're extraordinarily well-funded startup, but we are a startup. And sometimes your original idea, your original premise is wrong. And that's the exact time that you have to pivot. And to me, it feels like right now for LIV, they have to admit this was a terrible idea and they have to move to something else. And if they do that, there is a chance that when we talk 10, 20 years down the line, that they could be chipping away at the immense advantage that the tour holds over them right now.
I'm just thinking out loud, but maybe that's abandoning the team competition, trying to build really good individual tournaments with, you still have some kind of team affiliation at the end of the year. Maybe there's a team competition, like not fully abandoning it, but this format has to go away. To your point, Andy, blow it up where there's both a team and an individual competition happening simultaneously. That is never going to work. Yeah.
I mean, listen, I think I kind of posed this a little bit on the Shotgun Start last week, but like to me, if you wanted to ensure long-term success, what you have to be, and maybe the biggest miss of LIV in its entirety to date, was not realizing that who the best golfer is today, is rarely the same best set of golfers in 5 years. And if you want to control golf, you have to control where the young talent is going. And if they pivoted to make a very friendly league for young talent, I think that would be the bet I would make if I had billions of dollars at my disposal, and the way that I wanted to, and like in a way, like, does this whole right this moment, which feels like rock bottom for LIV, Does this moment spark them to develop that chip on their shoulder and hey, we got to change stuff? But like if I was LIV, I think that's what I would probably start to try and work towards, is how do we unravel what we have and build a format and a league that's super friendly to the best young players in the game, and try and build something that for the next 20 years around that theory.
Well, go all in on the youngsters, right? 5 years from now, all of a sudden you have all the best players in the world.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like the tour, that was like one of their biggest advantages the whole time, was they control all the pathways and all the young talent in the sport. All right, let's take a quick break to talk about our partner, Good Walk Coffee. This is what's helping fuel Fried Egg Golf. It fuels my household here. We've got a couple collaborative coffee blends that we created with Good Walk Coffee. As a reminder, we're partners with Good Walk Coffee on this. The way it works is we have a revenue split when people buy our coffee. So it comes right directly to us. It's a really nice way for this partnership to work. And it's excellent coffee. That's the other piece of this. We really, really love the coffee. We have two different blends. We have the Fried Egg Golf blend, which is a medium light roast for people that like kind of a lighter roast. And then we have the Shotgun Start blend, which is a medium dark roast. I live in a household where one person likes the Shotgun Start blend and one person likes the Fried Egg blend. So, as natural, I'm losing out on that battle. You can get our blends delivered to you on a subscription basis. They can come once a week, once every 2 weeks, or monthly. The nice thing is it's super fresh coffee. It's often roasted a couple days before you get it, which ensures the best, tastiest cup. So if you're interested in subscribing, that's the way to do it. You'll never have to go to the grocery store. Again, you can go to goodwalkcoffee.com/fried egg to subscribe. If you use the code fried egg at checkout, you'll save 20% on your entire order. If you order a subscription, it'll be 30% off your first order and then 10% off on all future shipments. You can either subscribe or you can buy a few bags, try it out, see which one you like. We really appreciate all the support and everybody that does this program. Obviously, if you drink coffee, give it a shot. And that's goodwalkcoffee.com. Big thanks. Let's get back to our conversation with Kevin and Joseph. That we recorded this before the Sony. We'll have Sony results, so maybe I'll talk about what happened in the intro here. But I wanted to get you guys on to preview the year ahead in golf, and we each picked out 3 storylines or stories for the 2026 season that we are watching. Who wants to go first?
Joseph, I defer to you.
All right. Did you guys just go 3 player-driven storylines or 3 storylines more broadly? I kind of did both, so can lead with either one here.
Mine are mostly player-driven, but they're storylines because they're about players, and golf's an individual sport.
Sure. Okay. All right. I'll start then with, I think Tommy Fleetwood is one of the most compelling stories of 2026. I do. I think you can make the argument right now that he is the second best golfer in the world. And I know some people would take exception to that and say that's disrespectful to Rory. But I think this back half of the year, what Tommy's done over the past few months, getting that first win, then wins again in India, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that Rory, after such an emotional, spent year traveling the globe, would have a little bit of a step back in 2026. I think that's fairly reasonable to expect, sort of like he did after his Masters win. And for Tommy Fleetwood to be one of the players vying for that second spot, he's been incredible over the last few months. Andy, you guys made the point on the Shotgun Start after his India win that he's sort of ascended to a different level of superstardom. I think a lot of people enjoy that storyline of the golfer who's fallen short so many times, and he does seem to have tapped into a broader sports audience. Tommy's right there. I was just looking at results in signature events last year, just limiting the data to signature events, the most competitive fields right now outside of majors. Scotty was number 1, gaining almost 2.5 shots per round, and Tommy was number 2 at 2 shots a round. Next is Rory at 1.3, like a pretty significant gap behind Tommy, which, again, Tommy's major results have not been amazing. That is the next step for him to take. But now that he's proven he can win on the biggest stages outside of majors, right, with the Tour Championship, I think it's very reasonable for Tommy to be in the mix at majors this year, and potentially be the second player of the world. With that newfound stardom, I think he's probably one of the most new-ish compelling storylines. He's not a new golfer, but a new superstar profile type person.
I like that, but is it fair to say that Tommy still gets a little nervy down the stretch? Like that there's an element of mental sort of like, oh my God, am I really going to do it? Like I'm not convinced that one Tour Championship win in a field of 30 people, and then some of them very disinterested, is like means that like Tommy has gotten over all of that stuff. Like I want to see him great on a Saturday afternoon at the Masters, or there's going to be a lot of chatter, a lot of talk when he goes back to Birkdale. Hey, this guy just right up the road. Oh, this is
Southport.
What a great win this would be for the hometown boy. I don't think he's handled that kind of stuff particularly great in the past. Truly one of the nicest people in all of sports, not just golf. So I would love it if Tommy like emerged wearing a green jacket from this year. I'm just a little bit skeptical. Like, would you think like straight up, you'd say better than Rahm, better than Bryson, like better than Xander, like a fully healthy Xander? I just can't quite get there with that one, Joseph.
I think he might get a little shaky down the final stretch is valid, but that is also one of the most tenuous narratives in golf, time after time. That was said about Xander Schauffele, and then he won 2 majors in 2024. People love to throw around the like, this guy can't get over the finish line, and then they do, and then it's like, oh, he got over it.
Other sports, because there's only one winner and there's 156 players. Sure. And I think like one of the easiest things to do in sports in analysis is to say they aren't going to do it. Especially in golf, because the percentages, the likelihood are that they aren't going to get it done. Outside of like really Scotty, that's the right bet every tournament, is to say he's not going to win.
He also may not have to make a clutch 5-footer. Like people win golf tournaments up to going into 18 and making a bogey. And the other part of it that I was going to throw in, the major championship venues, I do think set up pretty favorably for him this year. You mentioned Birkdale, but I mean, Shinnecock, the last time we were at Shinnecock, Tommy Fleetwood, following that really low Saturday round, was right in the mix as well. I mean, that's a great golf course for Tommy Fleetwood. So I just think it's very reasonable to consider him a top 2 to 4 player in the world right now without feeling nervous about that at all. And if he wins a major championship this year, it shouldn't surprise anybody.
Who would be your top 4 players in the world right now? So you go Scotty, and you're saying Tommy too. How would it go? How would 3 and 4 look?
Yeah, either Rory or Tommy too. And then I would put Rahm at 4, and I think Xander and Bryson could easily end up working their way in that 4 or 5 spot. I think Xander's going to have a really good year. That's somebody I had tabbed to talk about on this podcast. But I would go, Scotty, Rory, Tommy, and Rahm. That would be my top 4.
Kevin, what's your story? What's your first one?
All right, guys. My storyline is Jordan Spieth. I think that our boy is going to be back. Truly back. I think right now, the opportunity to buy on Spieth Island has never been greater. Okay, I'm walking into the Lion's Den with 2 of the biggest Spieth skeptics here in the golf media industry. But look, like I'm telling you right now, Spieth Island is open for development. Okay, there's low interest loans, there's tax incentives. We're offering to just cut regulations and completely ignore environmental concerns, all for anyone who wants to buy. So the opportunity for him to be a top 10 player at the end of the year, I think is there. Is this realistic? Maybe not, but I think we're finally healthy. He's finally, he just had the third kid now. He's got some space in between that. So all of that, recovering from the wrist injury and having another kid into the mix, that's a 2025 story. Going forward, in good position with his swing. He obviously, the last few years, he's been driving it great. If you can just get that iron play back to the plus, zero point 0.8 strokes around, I think, where it was when he was sort of one of the truly, elite players. Maybe that's a little bit, maybe it's like 0.5. I think primed for a good year. We're gonna win at least once. We're gonna contend in a major, truly contend. Couple runners up finishes and a spot on the President's Cup team. That is my storyline to watch.
Go ahead, Andy.
I mean, I think I'm curious, as someone who maybe raised skepticism as early as anyone. I think this has to be the last year that there's a belief if it doesn't happen, because I feel like we've heard similar storylines every year for the last 6 years. Now,
I can't speak to those. I wasn't part of that. This is the year. This is fully healed, ready to go.
Now, I think where I could get behind the idea you're healthy, you've worked your swing. I think I worked on your swing, you're back, you're in a good state of mind. I think the thing that's challenging for me at this point is when we saw Jordan Spieth be a dominant player, he had never faced adversity in his life. He had no scar tissue. He was this human being that, was setting course records at age 14 in Dallas. He was, a wonder kid, the golden child, and he rolls up onto the PGA Tour, gets his card he has adversity in the sense that he missed Q school, and then wins on a sponsor's exemption, and that's the rocket ship up. Where I struggle is golf gets, I can't even begin to, golf gets so much more challenging when you lose how naive you are, and when you develop scar tissue. It goes to the Patrick Harrington, experience isn't all it's cracked up to be. With experience, you lose innocence. And I think with Jordan, more so than my questions are not technical. They aren't about, can he hit the ball? My questions are mentally, can he get to the place he used to get to where he played golf free? And I think this is the thing that Rory would tell you that he struggled with for years and years and years at Augusta. And for Jordan, it's not a struggle of one event a year. It's a struggle of, I haven't done this. This used to come second nature to me. And now I haven't done this for a long time at any semblance of a high level. And I think that's the challenge for Spieth. I also think, and Joseph, I'm sure will hit on this, and it probably at a greater degree, is the sheer level of competition from when we saw Spieth be the Spieth player that people, fantasize about. That tour is long gone. And I guess that's your music, Joseph.
I know I've floated this on this podcast before, but yeah, every sport, I think there has been a rapid development from 2015 to 2025, 2026. Not just the way that golf is played, every sport. And Jordan Spieth, that was a long time ago, and he was making 25% of his putts between 15 and 25 feet, which wasn't super sustainable. So you combine a ball striking standard that's gone way up over the past 10 years with putting magic that we're probably not going to see again. And I do think you're chasing something that doesn't exist anymore. So is there a glimmer of hope? Sure. I could see him getting in the mix at the Texas Open or something where he always plays well, or Scottsdale. But I think the chances of Jordan Spieth contending in a major, he's going to have to make so many putts, which is possible. He could get really hot and make some 25, 30 footers at Augusta and sort of get in the mix. But I do think buying the other side of this argument is the sharp side of golf history. Like we've heard this for years about Spieth. Phil Mickelson going into last year said that Phil was going to have a resurgent year. Like every golfer talks themselves into why they're going to have a breakout year, but I'm highly, highly skeptical. And I think the chances that Jordan Spieth's a top 10 player in the world again with any level of consistency is way below 10%.
Okay. I think like one of the things though, and I would almost, I think the smart buy might actually be on Kevin's side. What Kevin's proposing is he wins, he contends a decent amount, and he makes a President's Cup team. And I do think like Jordan Spieth, I think his ceiling at this point as a player is he is going to be at the back end of the mix of auto selection for team competitions. And if he's anywhere near the thing, he's going to get the captain's call, and that's kind of where he's going to sit. And I think like we just have to recalibrate, in my opinion, the expectation of Spieth. And like, I want Jordan Spieth to be relevant. I want him to play well. It's good. Makes watching golf more fun. I think we just as a society need to maybe recalibrate that like the ceiling on Jordan Spieth is like he could be a top 20 player. I think the years of him being the best player in the world I have a hard time getting there.
No, I can't. I wouldn't go there. No.
And I think that's like where society wants to keep seeing him walk back through the door and remember the time when, he was the greatest player of the world. And it's just, I don't think that can happen. And I think it's like almost unfair expectations to put on him.
And the line should be, is he within 2 of a major lead going into Sunday? Like, to me, that is what meets. Is that too high, Kevin?
I think that the thing is Augusta National provides him a place that it's always possible there, which is why you can't slam the door, because he's I mean, you gave me the stat with that Zalatoris is a part of. There's 4 players in the history of golf that finished in the top 10 in their first 3 Masters, and he's one of them. Like his game and the way it's made up with his short game prowess, it just matches up really well with that place.
I think the Open Championship too. I think those 2 championships in which he is in for life, or until his competitive life, will give him opportunities that others won't. He has a very good mind for shot makers golf, right? It is. Does he have the same ability relative to the rest of the talent that is? Like, no, probably not. But like, I really think like when it comes to, okay, the ball's below my feet and I have to hit a draw off of this to a back pin, like those are shots that Jordan is pretty good at comparative to guys who are just TrackMan legends. And I still think like the Open Championship in Augusta will provide those opportunities. Is top 10 probably a little ambitious? Yes. But let's stick your neck out and make a claim here. I think top 30 may be more realistic. I just think like we're truly healthy with the wrist. Golf is more interesting when he's in the mix, whether it's a crash and burn at the end or whether it's the idea that he could drag it across the line. Like I think this, you're right. This is the year. It's put up or shut up time, with the caveat that like he could win the Masters at 41, having been, crap for many years, which is the Masters has proven that those things occasionally happen.
Isn't it amazing that this year we don't have the will Rory win a major storyline?
It's kind of nice.
Yeah, it is. I'm happy that we don't have to go back down that road. Maybe, the good news is if Spieth does this, we won't have to go down this road again next year.
Yeah.
I've got my storyline is, our signature events, the much maligned signature events, actually good?
Do you have a position on one side of it?
I mean, I think there's a lot that you could want more out of these. I would love bigger fields. I'd love cuts. I'd love things. But as I look at the current construct of them, the exclusivity of them, I kind of am excited about Sony Open and Amex and Waste Management, because of the plethora of big names that are attempting to play their way into signature events. I think if you remove the sponsor exemption opportunity from signature events, I think we're almost there. Because this year, I have here are the players that do not have their signature event status, from big time names, right? You have Spieth, Zalatoris, Brooks, Max Homa, Wyndham Clark, Adam Scott. Those are all guys that are just trying to play their way into signature events.
Wow, Tom Kim not even getting a mention anymore.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond to that. But anyways, then you have like young guys like Thorbjornsen, you have Potgieter, Johnny Kiefer, Marco Penji, Marco Penge. I have to pronounce it correctly here. I cannot allow that to come over.
No shock and start pronunciations on this podcast.
Marco Penge. You have guys like that are also trying to play their way in. And in a couple years removed from this, I think that is a pretty riveting undercard to these regular events. And I think it's something to take away when you start to talk about the scarcity schedule, how it could work if you really boiled it down to everybody plays X amount of events and there's free flow in. This seems like it. There's relegation. If you got rid of these sponsors exemptions and you told me that Spieth had to play his way in to these things, I think that's a really good recipe for the PGA Tour. They just have to rip the Band-Aid off, because the reality of these events is the sponsors exemptions are going to those guys that I just listed, and that's the most compelling part of having to play your way in if they don't have sponsors exemptions.
I think what I've learned is that the problem isn't that AT&T needs Jordan Spieth to be playing Pebble Beach. I think they need him to be playing, to be showing up to corporate events and stuff that week. And how are you cutting this massive check as AT&T and not having one of your biggest ambassadors on site that week? That seems to be the hang-up.
They got Matt McNeely sent him.
Well, that's true. But I completely agree, Andy. You're preaching to the choir with this. I think the fields just need to be a little bigger, and maybe there need to be a couple more of them, which sounds like that might be what we're getting in 2027. A little bit of a bigger schedule from a signature event standpoint, a smaller schedule overall, but like more of a blend between the Korn Ferry Tour and the non-signature events, a few more signature events that might be like 90, 100 players and a cut line. That's an amazing product, in my opinion.
I think the best thing maybe along this line that Brian Rolapp could do is help golf move on from its like obsession with nostalgia. Like this idea that like, hey, like, Ricky Fowler and Jordan Spieth are like the most important things. It would be like if the NFL was like, well, we got to have like Phillip Rivers get a quarterback, spot, or Drew Brees has got to play
that's
somewhere.
Too soon for Joseph is to watch because play.
If that was continuing like over and over again, we're still hanging on to people who clearly like were yesterday's greats, then I think the VJ thing is really interesting, right? Like one of my storylines is how many tournaments will VJ try to jam up the tour and play? And what will could VJ like make some cuts in there and just be like sort of, will VJ do media all year, or will he just basically like, decline to talk about any of this and just absolutely take up a spot in every single tournament? I'm all for it. I think that would be such a funny thing if VJ was just like, I'm going to stick it to the tour every single way that I can over the last. If he was just like going into, craft services and loading up his plate with as much food as possible and being like, I'm getting my value out of this last year. I'm pocketing the shampoos in the player showers. I'm doing everything I can to sort of say one last FU goodbye to this place.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. They have to rip the Band-Aid off on exemptions in general. Like if I miss 30 cuts and I get like have an out of body putting week one week and I get it done and I win, that doesn't mean I should get to be on tour for 2 years. I know winning is challenging, but like if you talk to any great player, they're trying to be more consistent. Consistency is the core, consistently great is the thing that every player is trying to be. not have one great moment, right? And I think like these signature events, if you focused on like, can we get these at the best possible venues we can? And can we make it a pure meritocracy where we have this relegation and promotion element that works really well in soccer or European football? Like, and I think would work really well for golf. We saw this when Justin Thomas was playing Wyndham a few years ago, and like just how riveting it was to watch him try and make the cut so he had a chance to finish in the top 70. This is the core of what your product should be. And I think like as I sat and looked at this list, I realized like, God, if sponsors exemptions didn't exist, this would be fascinating. And it's going to be fascinating with Brooks Koepka because he is not eligible for sponsors exemptions into signature events. It's going to be fascinating. Like, does he play all these events trying to get in to keep upping his status on tour? Which, you know, I think he's going to. It seems like if he went through and he's paying all this money, you know, or he's doing the 5, you know, like if he's going through this, he wants to play pro golf for a while.
The only part I'd push back on, I think the 2-year exemption actually is not a bad idea for somebody like Nick Dunlap in trying to entice young talent to play on the tour. Like I understand Brian Campbell, you know, won a couple times last year and isn't necessarily a PGA Tour player.
Illinois golfers.
But I don't think it's crazy to have a merit-based long-term exemption like that as long as it's not into signature events. So I think what you're getting at is that the top tier of PGA Tour events need to be purely based on merit. And I completely agree with that. But a 2-year exemption for winning the Amex like Nick Dunlap did, that helps keep him away from LIV. So I think like what the PGA Tour has done with PGA Tour U, for example, is one of the most important developments of the amateur to professional pipeline in the last 25 years. And it's been a wonderful development for college golfers and getting more reps. So I don't know that I'd want to yank away that 2-year exemption on that front, because I think giving Nick Dunlap that 2-year runway was really important. But for signature events, it needs to be based purely on your performance.
I have a storyline, I think, segues in from that very point that Joseph.
VJ, we've discussed VJ, right?
We did discuss VJ. I think that was probably enough to give VJ, unless you have something to add to that.
Nothing else on VJ.
Nothing on VJ.
I find it humorous. I'm excited about it. Just someone sticking it to the man. I always appreciate.
So this ties in a little bit with my point of like, hey, nostalgia can't like fuel you forever. The one kind of constant in golf is that young superstars emerge like every 5 years or something, right? We haven't really had one like emerge like since Scotty, essentially. Who is going to be the next person who kind of elevates themselves into that next tier? Like, is it going to be Michael Thorbjornsen? Is it going to be Aldrich Podgeter? Is it going to be Pearson Coody? Is it going to be, you know, Jackson Koiven? Is it going to be one of these guys
Luke Clanton,
right? So we know just based on history, that person is going to emerge, right? The person who wins 4, 5, 7 majors, you know, that's probably stretching it, but next person who's going to win 4 or 5 majors is out there right now. That person has been born. They have been good at golf for a while. Who it is, we cannot say, but we can sort of guess and predict. And I think that is something that's fascinating. Like, you know, Podgeter is 21 years old and hits the ball an ungodly distance, even compared to today's standard for like guys who hit it really far. Can he sort of clean up other parts of his game and become like, you know, the next Ernie Els, the next great South African player? I don't know. Like
KVV, I don't know if you know this, but you're sitting next to virtually arguably the biggest Podgeter skeptic on the planet, and Joseph.
Let's do it.
You've actually hit one of my storylines exactly. Mm-hmm. Does a young sub 25-year-old star emerge? It was one of my storylines. Hit it exactly. I think Podgeter's interesting. Joseph will come back with why he's not interesting. What I think's interesting about Podgeter is he's won giant tournaments at a very young age and done like ridiculous things at a young age throughout his life, including winning PGA Tour events. And I'm curious, qualifying for the PGA Tour, winning, I think it was the European, he won, what was the AM event he won that got him into the Open? He has just consistently won. And that's something that usually is a marker of great young players. So, yeah.
I think a couple things. Well, this is similar to one of my storylines, so I'll throw that in there. But I do think if you ask people, especially who watched a lot of really good college golf, one of the names they're going to tab there is Michael Thorbjornsen, that they think he might be kind of the truth. And I think that that's a pretty good prediction over the since last April. He's been really good, and he was a little injured coming out on tour when he debuted, and now he's been healthy and he's been a lot more consistent. So I think there's a chance that that's the name, Kevin. One of my storylines was what happens with Jackson Koivin this year, and just in general, the youth talent in this NIL LIV Golf era. When do they decide to turn pro? Which tour do they decide to go to? And Koivin's going to be a fascinating use case. I think he'll probably turn professional this year, and that's somebody who's arguably one of the best amateurs of the last 15 years. Some people would say since like Spieth. I think he is better than that little crop that came out with Hovland and Morikawa and Wolf and Suh. I think Jackson Koivin is better than those guys. So we might have one of them. And then the other guy that's waiting in the wings a couple years down the line, Will Zalatoris had mentioned him on the Fried Egg Pod, but Miles Russell, man, people think very, very highly of that kid. And I know he's still a teenager, but I've been hearing some crazy stuff. People saying he's the best 16-year-old they've ever seen. Like, there is a lot of hype around this kid. So watching what the best 16 to 20-year-olds do in general with this new era of NIL, and also LIV Golf potentially offering players to come over there and take guaranteed money instead of going to the PGA Tour, which is a little more cutthroat. I think that's just a massive storyline to keep an eye on. And I'd be super excited about a Jackson Koivin professional debut. That's one of the biggest debuts, again, probably since the Morikawa Hovland crop.
I mean, you look at what he did last year. It's just remarkable. Crazy. The number of top, and it, I think the thing that stands out maybe more so to date than others, like you could look at like Clanton or Thorbjornsen in comparison to Koivin. To me, the thing that stands out about Koivin, and this stood out about Morikawa in particular, event to event consistency. It is incredible. I think Morikawa, if I recall, I haven't thought about this in 6 or 7 years, so please don't hold me to this, but Morikawa went a couple years at Cal without finishing outside the top 8 or 9 at a college event. And when you start to see that to me is the hallmark of who's going to really thrive on the PGA Tour, because that shows me that guys aren't playing bad rounds. And the thing about the tour, and what every level of golf you go up, the room for error in terms of a poor round goes down. Where in college you can shoot a 74, recover with a nice finish. The PGA Tour, you shoot a 74 on Thursday or Friday, you're probably going home. The Korn Ferry Tour, very much so. Like, if you start to look at the Korn Ferry Tour, it is like the guys that are at 50 on the Korn Ferry Tour are just guys that haven't figured out how to have that 4-round consistency. And to me, one of the things that we should be looking more at is that tournament to tournament consistency at the collegiate level. And to me, Koivin, that is the thing with Koivin, is like you're shocked when he's not there. And I think that's the thing that stands out. And maybe, I know like a lot of people are super high on Luke Clanton. I think people should be. I think there's a reality here where, we're talking about what does one emerge. We could come out of this year with 2 or 3 that emerge, and you're like, okay, these are guys are top 20 players. Someone who hasn't been mentioned here, who's on the verge of being a top 20 player, who's consistently taken a little bit of time to get his feet wet, Chris Gotterup. is someone that hasn't been mentioned here, and you could easily see him leaping up and being a top 12 player in the world by the end of the year.
Here. It's just always fun to like talk about guys, and then you look back like 5 years. I mean, I think we all thought Zalatoris and Hovland, were going to be like great players, and that they've been great, but they haven't really put the consistency together to be like great player historically yet, and that they still could emerge. But it's like thinking back, like, all right, well, one of these guys that we're mentioning right now is probably going to be like the next great American player, or the next great South African player. Joseph, skepticism aside, I mean, look, I think you're right to be skeptical of Poggater a little bit, because like there's elements of the game that are not there, but there's so much of it now is about, well, if you can just wail on the ball and have wedge into 70% of your holes, it's a pretty big advantage for the way that golf is played now.
Yeah, I think just with Poggater, you need to see a little more, some good golf on some golf courses that don't lend themselves as well to that type of strategy, right? We're talking about some good performances at Detroit Golf Club and Vidanta Viarta, which, you can kind of bomb it and then hit a little 80-yard shot out of the rough at Detroit Golf Club. So I'm not like, I don't think he stinks or anything. I'm just saying of all these young talents that we're talking about, he wouldn't be at the top of my list.
I think what's also interesting about this, and this is just something I found myself thinking about after while I was prepping for the Zalatoris interview, was, there wasn't in 2022 when Zalatoris got injured, there wasn't, Scheffler had gotten to the top of the world rankings at that point, but the premise of them being like drastically different class players was not, that far-fetched. And you might look at Zalatoris's, major record and be like, look, this guy's contended in more majors. He's been closer. Scotty has one, but, Zalatoris has done all this other stuff. And it wasn't this like extreme difference, in terms of who each of them was. And I think that's what's so fun about golf. Maybe more so than some of these other sports where like we, in basketball, we know Victor Wembanyama is a freak, and he's, year 2 and it's going to be, or year 3 of his career. And it's going to be hard to fathom somebody being better than him in 5 years. Right. In golf, like the skill sets, the margin for error is so small and fractional, and you don't know who's going to develop different skills, who's going to have things happen to them in their body or their, mentally or in their life that's going to, derail where they once were. And it is one of the things that makes, the sport of golf such a fun thing to talk about, because, it can be gone with the snap of a finger, and it can be found, seemingly just as quickly. And it could be someone that you don't expect. That's the thing that's amazing about Scotty is like, in 2020, if I told you that the greatest player, we've seen since Tiger was in this crop of young players, Scotty would be like a third card selection.
If we're doing unexpected players, I can throw my third storyline at you, but I don't even know if you've done your second one, Andy. It's just a natural segue.
You go, and I'll wrap it up, because we'll be at all of them then.
I think one of the most fascinating golfers right now fits in that bucket, Andy. Like, no one would have seen him coming. What if Ben Griffin is just really good at golf? And I do, like, I think I've mentioned this before, but a great nugget I heard on a Daryl Morey, Sixers, former Houston Rockets GM, like kind of at the forefront of a lot of analytical thinking. But he's always said, if somebody doesn't look the part and they're producing results, you need to pay attention to that person, not only because they're getting the same results, but because they've been overlooked. They've probably had people try to mess with their swings or their shot in the NBA, and they've persisted and still succeeded in spite of that. And I think with Ben Griffin now, we got to zoom out and like, what else does he need to show people that maybe he is a legitimate top 10 player in the world? he had 2 top 10s in major championships last year, and he won 3 times on the PGA Tour. One of them was a Zurich, which I wouldn't count too
it seems like
significantly.
Andrew won that tournament.
Yeah, that was mostly Novak. But the other 2 weren't the strongest fields in the world, but he had 2 top 10s in major championships last year. Only Scotty and Bryson had more than that, and Ben hasn't even played in the Masters. He only played in 3 of them. Like, he stood toe-to-toe with Scotty at Memorial. Like, at what point is Ben Griffin, do we just start considering him to be a very good player? Because I could see a year from now us being like, well, remember when Ben Griffin was good and now he's the 30th best player in the world? Or this year, he could go out and win a major, and we should have seen it coming. So I think it's interesting. I don't know where you guys land on Ben Griffin, but I think he's a fascinating person to pay attention to this year.
Something that I was going to say about Ben Griffin that you hit on is to me, one of the more, the bigger points, and yes, we should be buying all the Ben Griffin stock, is the Memorial, which he didn't win. But on Saturday, it almost became a moment of like, he got so far out in front that I could have seen him being like, whoa, like I'm running away with this. And it almost like was like, what happens in golf when you start thinking like, oh, I'm like, it becomes like an out of body, like weird. Like, I didn't know I could run away with a PGA Tour event, let alone the Memorial. To me, the biggest signaler of that is like, through 45 holes of the Memorial, he was just outlandishly better than everybody else. A demanding test of golf, outlandishly better than Scotty, who went on to win the event. And to me at this point, if somebody goes to the Memorial and beats Scotty, that's like kind of like a wow, like that's it. Just like what it used to be with Tiger. If somebody goes to the Memorial, Bay Hill, and beats Scotty, that's like or Torrey, it's like a whoa, or beats Tiger at one of those places. Like, wow, that's a surprise. So I think like Ben Griffin, you're spot on with saying that. Like, it is like everybody's always searching for the next person, and sometimes also ignore the person right in front of them.
Love it.
Where are you on Ben? Are you buying Ben Griffin, or are you selling Ben Griffin, Kevin?
I need to see a little bit more. I mean, I didn't really love the way he played in the Ryder Cup, but I feel like
give him a chance.
Yeah, it's because he played a Max Fly.
The Max Fly conspiracy. This Max on Strixon conspiracy
you don't get to play in the Ryder Cup.
Upsetting. Yeah, I'd like to see a little more, but I do look when your short game is like that freaking good, like it makes you fun to watch, right? Because we're always going to be, even on your bad days, like, around it, close to finding it. So yeah, I just would like to see a little more.
My last storyline to watch, and I think it's the biggest story in golf, is Scotty Scheffler. Had to do it. The 3-year run has been insane. Absolutely mind-boggling run of golf. And I think when I just am curious how long he wins at a 5+ tournament a year clip. That was a clip. If you talk about, you have Rory and DJ as kind of the last great players of a generation. I think Brooks falls into that also, but in a different sphere of like, he won majors. He didn't win regular events. DJ, I think, won 5 times once in his career. And you're talking about just a ridiculous pace that he is on right now and the way he's racking them up. And I'm just curious how long the period is. It could be over this year and he could win 3 times and still be number 1 in the world. I wouldn't be surprised. He could win 10 times. And at this point, I wouldn't be surprised. But I would be surprised if it goes on for 3 more years, because it's really hard to do what he's doing at the level he's doing for a really long time. So I'm fascinated by, I think like for me, Scotty has kind of eclipsed he's boring. He doesn't give you a lot. He's giving you more. And at this point with Scotty, I'm just fascinated by the absurd level of greatness and the absurd standard at which he's set for his play. And I just am fascinated about how long it's going to happen.
The next few years feels like kind of a referendum on, all right, are we looking at like a top 3 player of all time? Or are we looking at like a top 10 player of all time? Like you could probably say like top 10 seems very realistic, but like if he wins, like rips off 3 more majors, like all of a sudden is 10 in play? Like I think, I think so. My last point, Andy, that I sort of, the VJ one was kind of just thrown in there, but this next year feels like a little bit of a referendum on like, all right, can Rory serve at all in like, this can become like a little bit of a rivalry, right? If you think about like in 1977, Tom Watson had already sort of surpassed Jack Nicklaus as like the best player in the world. Like Turnberry was a great sort of, like, hey, Watson won 2 majors that year. Jack didn't win any, but Jack still won 3 more majors after that. 2 in 1980 and then 1986. And I kind of wonder if for Rory, like you could sort of almost look at like, this is like a tennis match where Rory won like in terms of like the great player who's in their 30s-esque. Rory won the first set and then Scotty won the next 2. Like Scotty's a better player than Rory is clearly right now. But Rory still could win the last set. He could rip off 3 more majors. He could win the Masters again this year. And then all of a sudden, Rory has 6 majors to Scotty's 3. It becomes like a little more interesting. It's like, wait a minute. Like, could Rory have like one more great run in him where he actually challenges Scotty? Or is he just going to sort of, kind of fade back a little bit and cede that spot to Scotty for good? And I think it'd be fun to see how the both of them react. Rory's been a great U.S. Open player the last 5-6 years. Scotty needs a U.S. Open to complete the slam. So Rory could be a person who stands in the way of that. Like, they're both going to go into Brookdale as like kind of some of the favorites there. All of that and how that plays out this year is really interesting. And I think, Joseph, the opposite could be true of like, yes, Rory had his clear letdown after the Masters, but he also kind of got recalibrated at the end of the year, winning the Irish Open, playing really well in the Ryder Cup. What if like that continues and he is sort of freed up a little bit at Augusta and he plays really well at the Masters? Then it's like, oh, what if Rory wins the Masters? Two Masters in a row. All of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, is Scotty the best player in the world, or did someone kind of answer the call here and get motivated to suddenly find something late in their career? I think that could be a really fun storyline, while conceding almost certainly Scotty is going to be the best player. I just think it's fun to think about what if Rory's like, no, wait a minute, I still have an answer to this.
Scotty has four major championships.
Excuse me, right?
Yeah,
but I think my biggest question with Scotty that I would love insight on from people who spent a lot of time around him in his junior golf days and college days is what kind of putter was he always like? Like what kind of putter was he like?
Forrest said he was a great putter always.
That stood out to me when he said that on the pod, because he was such a bad putter for stretches of his PGA Tour career. But if you zoom out and that's a small blip on a large body of work that he was always pretty good as a kid and decent enough in Texas, then I don't think this big putting improvement from last year is necessarily, we should expect it to regress back to close to 0. Like maybe Scotty is a decent putter moving forward, in which case I don't know how anybody touches him. And I'm not trying to be hard on Rory, like right after he wins and has this amazing year, he's due for a letdown. But I do think the gap between Scotty and Rory, even last year when Rory got back to form after the Masters win, after that little lull, it's still a big gap. And Scotty reminds us of that from time to time, like at Portrush. We can't forget like just how much he dusted people at Portrush and how much he's dusted people at Augusta. And Quail Hollow on that Saturday round last year was just absolutely exceptional. So as much as golf, you don't want to think that something's going to last forever, because it never does. I feel as good about Scotty being stable and reeling off more majors as at least I can ever remember feeling about somebody. I don't know that I remember exactly what it felt like when Rory was winning in 2014, and that felt like it was going to last forever. But the way Scotty's doing it is just so stable. And unless the putter goes, I have to imagine he wins another major this year. So, he's got some years on Rory.
The putter's the obvious one where you say he starts putting bad, like, because we've seen that. The other one that I think is that can creep up on players, and like this can just happen in your game, and it's easy to have happen. It's not iron play. It's not going to be a short game. The driver. where if once the driver starts to go a couple places you don't want it to go, there becomes like there's a mental, there's a reason there's something called the driver yips. And I'm not saying like full blown driver yips, but like there's degrees of that. And the only that's, the short game and the iron play are so freaking good, like so good. Mm-hmm. It's hard to imagine like a world, but all of a sudden you stop winning majors if the driver is mediocre. Like that's how this whole thing gets like a little bit derailed of like, he's so head and shoulders above somebody, above everyone, to like the only way I see him outside of the putter, which I actually don't think the putter is going to regress. I think that maybe there's like some small, I think he's going to be a good putter. But like where I see actually the most susceptibility is if he starts to drive it a little crooked. And that's the part of the game, because it kind of like builds pressure. It's the way you start holes. It becomes like golf is like, we talk about how golf is a non-reactionary sport and the challenge of that. I think the most challenging shot on a golf hole mentally is the tee shot in a way, because you're the approach shot around the greens are much more instinctual, where you're feeling like where you there's a lot of pressure to get off the tee, because it's really hard to be a happy golfer if you're not getting off the tee to what you believe your standard is.
Otherwise, he gets derailed his injury, right? And he did deal with a little back and neck injury in college. So I think that is also like, it's all over if that happens. I'm not saying it's likely, but it has to be called out.
Yeah. So I think, Scotty, like if you were gonna predict, like, what is your expectation for wins for him this year?
4.5, I would set the number at.
I think I'd go like 6.5 almost at this
6.5.
What I've seen, 6.5 and one major. Like in that 6.5 is one major. Maybe it's 5.5 with a major.
I'd take the under for 6.5, but you're right. I wouldn't be shocked if he won 7 times. I'd be like, yeah, this makes sense.
I mean, think about last year. He won 7 times, and for the first 4 months of the year, he wasn't right physically because of the hand.
Yeah, I mean,
it just depends on what tournaments we're talking about. Like, I think he needs one major. 1.5's reasonable, and then I think it's 2 to 3 other big wins. Are we counting like if he goes out and wins at Craig Ranch and even Scottsdale? Like those are so different now than winning.
Did you get your invite to Craig Ranch? You got invited.
Oh no!
I'll get that over to you.
I think I got one, so I'll forward it to you.
You can just go ahead and RSVP yes to that one. I'll say Scotty's. If we're just gonna say all tournaments total, I'll say 4.5 wins.
All right. That does it. Those are our storylines to watch. This was fun. This was fun catching up. We'll do this more throughout the year. Joseph, KVV, thank you. As a reminder, everybody should be checking out your guys' writing in the newsletter. It's been really fun to see, Joseph, when Joseph came on a couple years ago, it took our newsletter to a new level. And with both of you in there now, it's something that I feel like I can't wait to open up and read every morning that I do not contribute and know what's in there. So thank you guys.
We're saving space for you. We're keeping it warm for you whenever you're ready to fire it up.
Occasionally think about it.
Hell yeah.
All right, guys. Talk soon.
Thanks, Andy.
All right. Thank you for listening to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. PJ, big thanks to PJ for editing and producing this, and we will be back next week.